Hmm? Ah!
But eventually came out of the mountains and met up with my ex-girlfriend. And it's a wild story because she had been cliff diving in Maui around the same time, and she had actually broken her back and like hit a rock, when she like when she was diving, and like compressed a vertebrae or something. And like what happened to her was like at that time, like her friends pulled her up on shore and left, and she had this very powerful awakening experience. This podcast is really this is not really what my life is about right now, but we're going back.
Podcast Junkies, episode 71. Welcome back. If you're new to the show, this is what I like to call the podcaster's voice. Think of it as inside the actor's studio, except instead of actors, it's podcasters. And you're in the audience, and we're just kicking back and having a fun conversation. And you're listening in and you're discovering things you never knew about some of your favorite podcasters. That sounds like a show I would listen to. That actually sounds like a show I would produce. And that actually sounds like this show. You can tell it's been a long day. Did you catch last week's episode? It's with Bill Burrell of Home, Stories from LA, one of my favorite new storytelling podcasts. And the subject matter is the concept of home and what it means, and all the different things that it can mean. And we had a long conversation, about an hour and a half, and it was a lot of fun because I didn't even realize the time had gone by that quickly. And it's a good sign. It's a good sign that it's an engaging conversation. So check that out, episode 70. This week, we slowed things down a bit somewhat with someone that I reconnected with several weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago at this point. A good friend of mine, Morgan Dix, and I hadn't heard from him in a long time. And he had heard my episode with Jared Morris on the Rainmaker platform, because he's got a podcast of his own, which we talk about. And he said, Harry Duran, he said, I know that name. And he reached out, and I said, Morgan Dix, wow. Talk about a blast from the past. The last time I had seen him was probably in maybe 2010, I think so. Wow. And so it's so nice. It's another, because of my podcast story, that we got to reconnect, and we're going to stay in contact. And we had a really deep and meaningful, I'm searching for the right word. I think heartfelt, Zen conversation. You're gonna. I think this one's gonna resonate a bit differently with you when you listen to it. I'm excited to have you guys dive in, and I want you to check it out and let me know for yourself if this one was a bit different than the others in how you felt once all was said and done. Stay tuned, of course, for our retention hashtag at the end of the episode, where I see who's been naughty and who's been nice. Actually, it's after Christmas, so I don't think I can do that reference anymore. But anyway, stay tuned for that, and a recap and some other interesting stuff to talk about after this conversation with my friend, Morgan Dix. So let's get started, shall we?
All right.
Thank you so much for reconnecting, Morgan, and thanks for making it onto Podcast Junkies.
I'm happy to be here, Harry. Thank you.
And it sounds like my Yorkie disco is going to be making the occasional appearance as well.
I got a soft spot for Yorkies. I love Yorkies.
So I'm a big fan of leaving all that ambient noise in, because I think it's a reminder, like we're not trying to fool anyone that we're like professionally recording this in like some sound studio in Hollywood.
Exactly.
So, I think in the beginning, I think all podcasters are, oh my God, like, so a lot of podcasters start out in the closet and they're like, I want this to be perfect, and then they freak out and they do like 10 takes. And I think short of just having like good sound, to start off with. I think everything else is fair game, and I think it's just. I know we can talk a little bit about your experience, but I think as you expand and grow the show, and your listeners grow, they like to hear more of like you, right? You in your real life, and what makes you tick, and it doesn't have to be like sanitized.
Yeah, I agree. When I first started editing, I would get rid of every artifact. I would be like any like sigh or click or like, but now it's just, I love going off script as much as possible, because that's, you hit magic.
Yeah.
Then, you just like, what's things, can we swear on this or what?
You can.
Okay, shit flies out of your mouth and you're just like, that was, I had no idea, but that's what wanted to come out. And I think I've found that I'm more comfortable surrendering to that now and trusting whatever's going to come out is going to be good.
Yeah, and I've heard people say that the best stuff comes after like, the first 15, 20 minutes.
Yes.
So given that we've already talked that long pre-show, I think.
Yeah, we had our therapy session.
We had our, for the benefit of the listener, we've known each other years now, right?
Yeah.
And we, because we were part of a group called EnlightenNext, which is we're definitely going to get into that a little bit, but and then we just, I left the group and you left the group, or the group disbanded, and we sort of lost connection. And then you found me via a comment on an episode, or I think you listened to one of my recent episodes, right?
It was on the Rainmaker master feed that I saw Harry Duran interviews Jared Morris. And I was like, Harry, that's a podcast junkie. Do I know it? And then I listened to it. I was like, that's my Harry.
That's funny. And then you reach out. I was like, it's fun. It's funny because when you hear, it's like a blast from the past, like, and these voices, and it's just human nature that the voice and that experience like takes you back to where you were, personally, where you were, like, where your mindset was when you knew this person, and all the things you experienced together. And it was just like a flash, like a wave of emotions came back, like,
wow.
And of all the things, like, because we participated in an organization, and it was like, wow, man, it was like a real. The majority of everything that came back was like really positive, and just a reminder of like what a great experience I had. So
that's awesome.
Again, just trying to educate the listener. So EnlightenNext was, maybe you probably the best person to give the 30-second synopsis of what the group was.
I'll do my version. You do yours.
Yeah.
It was like, I think of it as, it was a spiritual educational organization, and we had a teacher who had this particular insight that was very powerful. But really, we were a kind of international community, and we did a lot of spiritual practice, a lot of meditation, and it had this whole evolutionary worldview dimension to it, and really kind of it positioned itself as a very forward-looking, kind of solutions-oriented community, and we and also an intensive practice community. We do a lot of spiritual practice, and we tried to evolve perspectives. That was like one way you could say it. We wanted to help evolve a new worldview that could help deal with the complexity of our current shit show, which is on display in America right now in spades. But like to how do you begin to transcend these intense polarized divisions that sort of tend to be the hallmark of modern, and even to some extent like early postmodern perspectives.
Yeah, and I think for me, a lot of it, and it seems like with every passing year, meditation is just becoming such more common. And it's yoga, meditation, all these meditative practices, contemplation it's almost the norm now, and that people expect that, if you 10 years ago, you tell people
it's
like,
amazing.
You tell people 10 years ago, I meditate every morning. They look at you like, what? Like, are you some type of weird swami or something like that?
Yes. Oh,
And so,
meditation.
yeah,
Yeah.
so the organization, I found it at a time when I was like had just moved to Atlanta, and I found a local group that was part of the organization, and then I started meeting with them on a regular basis and meditating with them, and then eventually I expanded my participation to joining some of the retreats they had, and I think one of the most life-changing ones that I participated in was the 10-day silent retreat, and
Where was that?
I did the one in Denver.
Yes.
And it's so funny because you think, well, you spent 10 days. Well, I'm just literally thinking about that right now. 10 days silent retreat. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. This was at the Shambhala Center.
Yeah. Shambhala. And people think like, wow, you must like have this connection with people, but you literally don't speak for probably 23 hours of the day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And yet you feel very connected. You're in your own thing, and yet you do, like, it is a strange thing, right? Because you're completely alone and at the same time completely connected.
Yeah, and it was just a crazy experience. And you do need like the first 2 or 3 days just to literally disconnect.
Yeah.
And then when it kicks in, we would meditate. I don't know. What do you think, Morgan? Like for at least, depending on how hardcore you were going, but at the very least, you were meditating 4 to 6 hours a day.
Oh yeah, easy.
Yeah.
Easily. And you know, if you were just in there in all the actual prescribed meditation sessions, you definitely, I think you would do at least 7 to 8 hours. And then, but I'm sure you did too. Like you end up sitting longer because lots of people are sitting through the night.
Yeah, there was. I did do one overnight session, or at least most of the nights.
Yeah.
And then a lot of time for the listeners are like, this is the therapeutic meditation session episode. But for me, and I probably, I'm the regular listeners will know that I've talked about the topic of the importance of meditation, and we'll get into why that's important. But I think for me, it's just grown into a regular practice for me. I can't say every single day, but I definitely try to make it a constant part of my daily life now. But I remember at the time that I would just force myself to sit. And obviously in the beginning, you think like, what's going to happen, what's supposed to happen, and all these preconceived notions about how you're supposed to handle things. And one of the, I had studied a bit of Buddhism before, so I was a bit prepared for like that monkey mind that happens when you're meditating. But I had one particular experience where I remember closing my eyes and then I opened them what felt like, 2 minutes later, but really like the whole hour had passed. And it was in that moment, I was like, whoa, like I finally like, it was kind of like, I was happy that I was able to experience that because, you go for 10 days and you feel like you want to have something happen, right?
Absolutely.
So actually I was looking into your bio. You've actually done what, 15 of these? The 10-day retreats?
Definitely.
That's bananas.
At least. I think probably, I went on all those summer retreats and then occasionally we would do another winter retreat for like another 10 days. And that would be just usually a small group of people. You you hunker down in one of the little meditation halls on the property where we had the ashram, and you're just, boom, you're in for 10 days. And I did that over New Year's and Christmas, I think 2 or 3 times, which was a beautiful thing to do. Like in the middle of the snow, you're just sequestered in a retreat environment. And so Colorado, we were in the middle of, I guess it was the summer, right? August?
Yes. Yeah, because I remember it was like a little before my my birthday, my 40th birthday, actually. Yeah.
Nice.
It was crazy.
That is crazy. And yeah, so a lot. Yep, a lot. I've done a lot of this, and God bless. I'm glad I did. That you build something when you do those retreats inside.
And so now you have your own podcast.
Yes.
And which is obviously why you were looking into shows about podcasting.
Yes.
And so yours is the OneMind podcast.
Yeah.
And what was the impetus? I mean, obviously you've had decades of experience as a meditator and teaching and all. And what was the driver for you to now use podcasting as a vehicle to spread that message?
I think there were a couple dimensions. Like one was I had been blogging for like a year or a year and a half. Yeah. And I was, like a lot of people, very captivated by the new Rainmaker series. And Brian Clark did this incredible series. And I thought, wow, this medium is amazing. I'm completely hooked on what he's talking about. And it's just audio. And yeah, I think I'm resonating very deeply with what he's saying, and the ideas are really coming through, and I'm grokking them. And he's through like both teaching and storytelling, he's really effective, and music. He's really effectively kind of bringing me in and taking me on a journey. And so I had been blogging about meditation for a little over a year, but once I heard their podcast, I thought, I want to do that. I think, doing a podcast about meditation would be a lot of fun. Also, I liked the creative challenge. I thought, this would just be a new medium. I want to try it out and see how it goes. And I also wanted to speak to this thing, which is that in general, there's just so many reasons why people think, and you alluded to this earlier, you need to be a particular type of person to meditate. You need to be a yogi, a hippie, a swami, a monk, or, basically just not very grounded. Or it just feels like it's way out, it's esoteric. It's what these Zen guys do. And I just felt like, you know what? I just want to talk about meditation, and I want to talk about meditation with people who love to practice. And maybe they're a teacher, maybe they're a scientist, and maybe they're just, someone who practices every day and they love their practice. But I wanted to demystify the practice for people. I wanted my audience to hear people speak lovingly about their practice. Like, why do you love to meditate? Why do you do it? And then, so I thought, all right, that'll be cool, because I can get people to tell their story. Like, because like you, I'm very compelled by story, and I think it creates a container for what then comes after. So I like to ask people, like, what's your story? How'd you even get into meditating? Because usually there's something interesting that propels people to take up meditation. Either it's like a loss, or they're healing, or they're on some sort of search for meaning, or, they want to change. They're looking for some sort of change. So there's usually an interesting story. And then that always sets up an interesting kind of set of questions then about their relative expertise in meditation. So that's kind of like, that was my goal, is like, if I can mix, storytelling with someone sharing their expertise, that's what I want to do. And, so that's kind of how I started.
What has, as you think back through the interviews you've had with people, and they talk about how they were introduced to meditation, is there a particular story that jumped out at you with someone having taken a unique path or a different path to find meditation?
Well, recently I interviewed a guy. So there's one or two, but so I interviewed a gentleman recently. He's the founder of something called iAwake Technologies, and that is like, you might have heard of binaural technology or brainwave entrainment. It's like it uses sound waves broadcast at different frequencies to kind of shift the brainwave frequency in your brain, or the sound frequency. I mean, look, I'm out of my depth already talking about it. I don't totally understand it, but so this is what he does, and this technology apparently can really take you accelerate your quote unquote progress or experience in meditation. And so I didn't know much about it. I wanted to interview this guy about it. And he had this very powerful story where he had been an on and off again meditator for many years. And he himself, I think, was a recovering addict. Mm-hmm. But his brother, so he was about 40 years old, his brother committed suicide in his living room. His brother was staying with him, and he committed suicide the same week, like the same week he lost his job. He found out his girlfriend was cheating on him with his best friend, and his dog got run over. And Jeez. It was just like everything collapsed, you know? And it's like, you think about those moments, you're like, all right, the universe is, when that happens to somebody, that, you know, that's obviously a make it or break it moment in your life. It's going to define you. And, you know, he sunk into a depression for a couple of years, as you would expect.
Of course.
And he kind of, in the end, came back to meditation and had discovered this technology, brainwave entrainment, through someone else, Centerpoint Research, I think it was called.
Yeah, that's right. I remember the CDs.
Yeah, Bill Harris.
Yeah.
And he started doing that, and it kind of expanded his experience, I think, a lot in the way that maybe mushrooms or different hallucinogens can kind of open your world up. Something like that happened for him, and he was able to just fall into a very deep state of meditation very quickly because of this technology. And then that kind of started his healing process. And so that was over 20 years ago for him. But man, he describes the process of meditation as really, a lot of people talk about like calming yourself, centering yourself, experiencing, higher states of awareness. And I think all of that, those are all valid and extremely important. But his kind of message was all about just not moving away from the pain, not moving away from the kind of tragedy that happened in his life after several years of running from it, and going into a really intense depression. He found this ground in himself where he could actually just sit with it. And, through his meditation practice, after about a year, he did some really significant healing and came out on the other side as, a more whole, a more integrated human being. And if you listen to it, you can tell right away he's a very soulful character. You can feel the imprints of those experiences in his voice, in his kind of overall transmission. He's a very positive, upbeat guy, but you just feel, when you meet people who've suffered deeply, you kind of feel they have that kind of weight of experience. And that's kind of, I think, one of the more recent stories that I found very poignant.
Yeah, that was episode 39.
Yeah.
So we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
And what about for you? Like, I know obviously could you obviously not the date, but can you remember when was the first time that you were conscious of the fact that you wanted to meditate or thought to give it a try?
I mean, for me, yeah. I think I had I guess it was in college. I had an experience that it was like I had, oh God, this is a story, man.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Okay. Well, okay. So it's basically like I had, I think I was suffering really from a broken heart, and I was in college, and I was really searching for answers, and I was desperate to find some sense of wholeness, and I felt like there was a big hole in my heart, and I didn't understand how to heal it. And none of what I was doing, in college, as you know, you experiment with everything, and you're looking in every direction to kind of, whether it's through drugs or through extreme sports or through, also I was just, I was pursuing all these extremes, and nothing was really filling that hole. And so I went on this, I drove one summer from like Vermont to Colorado, just like a straight shot. It took me 3 days, and I was all by myself. And at the time I was really into mountain biking and camping. So I'd never been to Colorado, and I really, really wanted to spend time in the Rockies. So I just went on my own. I think I was maybe 19 or 20. And I just spent like 7 days camping and mountain biking through Colorado and then out to Moab in Utah. And I was just on my own. And I think like something really significant happened on that trip for me, because I was so alone, and I put myself in such a kind of state of solitude. I went just into the backcountry, and I just went deep, deep, deep in there. And I found myself like utterly alone for probably, I would say, the first time in my life. And I was like, how the fuck did I get here? How am I suddenly in the middle of the Rockies on a mountain? No one has any fucking clue where I am.
Yeah.
And like, I'm a couple miles away from my car at the trailhead, and I'm alone. I'm like really, really alone. And like, I think that kind of exerted some sort of pressure on me, where I was just terrified of being that alone. It freaked me out. And I remember just like, kind of, it almost like I felt this kind of split inside of myself. I became aware, like there were almost like two sides of me or something, and I didn't understand it. But eventually came out of the mountains and met up with my ex-girlfriend. And it's a wild story, because she had been cliff diving in Maui around the same time, and she had actually broken her back and like hit a rock, when she like when she was diving, and like compressed a vertebrae or something. And like what happened to her was like, at that time, like her friends pulled her up on shore and left, and she had this very powerful awakening experience. This podcast is really this is not really what my life is about right now, but we're going back. So everyone, just so you know, it's like a lot of it might sound pretty woo-woo at this point. But
we're setting context.
Yeah. But and she grew up, her parents used to host Tibetan monks and Tibetan Rinpoches in their house in Marin County, like when they were refugees and when they were being persecuted in China. So she grew up in this environment where there were these kind of holy people all around her, like pretty significantly realized Rinpoches from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which, as you know, is just an ancient, powerful tradition. So I always wondered about that, because so she has this experience, and she just gets blasted wide open from this injury. And then we intersect there in Boulder, where she's going to school, and this thing had happened to her like a couple days earlier, and she was flying in, and we had planned to meet up. And she gets off the plane, and I can tell right away, she's almost like, I'm like, holy shit. Like she was like different. She was like a different person. Like, and it was like one of these things. It was like suddenly all that stickiness of like an old relationship was just gone. And she somehow was like, she was just in this kind of state of, I don't know how you say it. I would call it, if we're back in our EnlightenNext days, like an awakened state of awareness.
Okay.
She was just very awake, but there wasn't that. There was this sense of kind of no ego. And it was, we kind of like, we spent a day or two together there, but it just kind of was a very, like, it was a resolution to our relationship, but also like okay, it's really over type of thing. But that was just obvious. And she made it clear, but something interesting started to happen there, which was like, I started to have this experience of like elation and euphoria. And I didn't understand what was happening. And I was like vacillating back and forth between like fear and euphoria. And like, then the time came for me to drive home or drive down to Atlanta where I went to Emory for university. And I was like, every mile I drove away from Boulder, the fear just started to recede and the euphoria just took over. And I was like literally just overwhelmed by just the goodness of everything, of life. And I felt somehow in that moment like everything was perfect. My life was perfect just as it was. And one whole chapter had just come to a natural close. Another one was beginning, and I drove like 24 hours straight.
Wow.
It was just like, I was buoyed by this experience, and there was a full moon, and I remember like the kind of driving into Atlanta and thinking to myself, you know what? No matter what happens, no matter what, I'm always going to be okay, because like the mountains, they're unchanging. They'll always be there. There's a certain element of life that's permanent and that's eternal. And for, I think, my mind at that point, the closest representation to that was like the mountains, ageless. And there was something in me, whatever this thing was, that was like animating my awareness. It had this quality of like eternity or something. And then that's when I was just like, I need to meditate. That's kind of how I think over time I stayed connected to that and tried to understand it. And like that was like, that changed my life. I kind of, from that point onwards, that whole experience showed me that like discontinuous things can happen and you can change very significantly it's like there are bigger forces at play here in who we are and what our respective journeys are in this life. And some of it's mysterious and some of it's within your control. And that was the Genesis story.
That's powerful stuff, man. I didn't know some of that backstory. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
And as I listen to it, I mean, I get chills. Because you can hear the transformation almost like being replayed.
Yeah.
And as you experience it, you can hear it in your voice, the effect that it had on you. And I think, and in a way, I have a feeling that the listener is going to be affected in much the same way. And it's this unique personal nature of podcasting and how, typically these episodes are listened with earbuds, and so you're speaking into the listener's ear, and these stories resonate. And I think these, especially where you speak from the heart, just almost transport you back to that moment in time.
Yeah,
you can the fact that you can vividly remember all those details speaks to how powerfully that affected you.
Yeah,
and the idea of being in nature. I mean, I've had more of that effect recently because my wife and I recently moved from New York and we live in Los Angeles now, and we're very conscious of just being close to nature. I can look out of my window and see mountains now. And this is living in Silver Lake in LA, close to downtown, but it's just a reminder of how much California is really surrounded by a lot of mountains.
Yes.
That you can see them at every turn. And we go out of our way to just go spend time in the desert or go.
That's awesome.
And we went to the Sequoias and we went to Joshua Tree and we went to Death Valley. And it's this feeling of like, we recently did it for Thanksgiving where we went and we didn't want to be here in the city because, our families are, not here, and we just don't want to spend a long weekend in the city. So we went back out to Joshua Tree. It was our second trip. And it's just something about connecting with nature that allows this openness and gives you room to contemplate like some of the bigger things in life, and to put yourself into the perspective of how small we are when
Yeah.
you look at, like, all you need to do is stare up at the night sky in the desert, and you're just like blown away by the fact that we're just spinning on this marble amidst whatever, infinitesimal percentage of other stars are doing the exact same thing, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh man.
That's a powerful image, the one that you're spinning there. It's like I feel that the way you were just describing it, it does make you, that also is like, it's what mindfulness is all about. Like that's what, for you I felt that's what you're just invoking, like that sense of the present being so powerful, partially in that one is aware that it doesn't last. You are so small, and it's like, okay, we got like 10 minutes and then we're gone.
Yeah.
And it's a really short time.
So on one of your recent episodes, I think one of your friends, Sonia, was asking some questions that you decided to make into an episode about questions about meditation. And one of the ones, and we'll link back to that one as well. But one of the ones that she asked was the difference between meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could tease that out a bit, because I think that's really important. And, I know for the listener, it could have a lot of impact on how they live their day to day.
Yeah. Well, the mindfulness, I like to think of it as like meditation in action or meditation in motion. And I think it's so dynamic, but if meditation is really sitting quietly, being very still, not moving, and bringing your attention to whatever the anchor is for your meditation, maybe it's like counting your breath or whatever it is, just being present. But traditionally, that kind of that's like what people think of when they think of meditation. You're just sitting still for that time, and you're practicing your technique. And part of that is, you're building the muscles of your awareness, your choice. You're choosing again and again and again and again to let go. And, you can do that like 500 times or 1,000 times when you sit and meditate. But then then how is that relevant when you're like up the moment you get off that cushion or that chair, and then, you're getting up, you're going to the sink, you're going to fix your breakfast, you're going to, start thinking about what you're going to do for the day. You're starting to plan. Like, I think of mindfulness as like the quality of attention you bring to all of that. And I think it's part of why it's so popular right now is because we are so distracted as a culture, right? We're overwhelmed with information. We're overwhelmed with stimulus. We're just overwhelmed with like more things to do. We're more isolated, so we have to take care of more things on our own. We all carry a lot, it seems like. And then I think one of the byproducts of that is your attention the quality of your attention can erode. And because you often your attentions get divided. And if you're like me, you're trying to do like sometimes 10 things at once. And mindfulness is like, I would say it's the opposite of all that. It's the one pointed attention on whatever it is, the thing you're doing right now, and giving everything to that and that alone. You let go of everything else, and whatever you're doing, that's it. And you're bringing the full spectrum of your awareness to bear. So in any given moment, there's so much to be aware of, as it's like, what are your 5 senses telling you right now with what you're doing? Like, where is your mind? Is it distracted? Is it reacting, or is it ruminating on some sort of loop? What what's your ambient soundscape? What is all the incoming? Then, so that's just the external. What about the internal? Because they're just sensations, and then there's like currents or drives that are also moving you from within. And like in any given moment, it's just being attentive to everything that's happening. But if you're like at the sink and you're washing the dishes, part of it is, how does the water feel? That's like Thich Nhat Hanh's, great examples. Like, and then how does that wave of sensation roll through your body? And is your mind drifting away while you're washing the dishes, or are you really washing the dishes? It's like Gary Snyder, chop wood, carry water. There's something just powerful and simple about being completely attentive to the thing you're doing right now, and that's it. And even if you're not being attentive to that, so that's like mindfulness as I think about it. And meditation I think of as like kind of a battery for mind. Meditation is like a battery that charges up your meditative awareness and helps you be more mindful. So does that make sense about the difference?
Totally. And
do you personally relate at all to that?
1000%.
Nice.
It's interesting because on so many levels, right, personally,
yeah,
that it helps you be more present in your relationships if you can practice this, and as something as simple as having a conversation with your significant other. Is your phone off? Is your are you looking at the person in the eyes? Are you responding? Are you listening? Are you and the five senses check-in is so great because you can sort of take yourself through those checkpoints and like, what are you sensing with your hands? What taste do you sense in your mouth as you're speaking to this person? What are you smelling? What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Yes.
And you as you activate each one of those senses, it exponentially like lifts your awareness to the point where the everything is just greater than the sum of the individual parts.
Yes.
And so obviously on that personal level, if people were to practice that, I think they would find that their interactions with their fellow human beings would just be that much more enhanced. And then when you think about it, I think about it from a podcasting perspective, right?
Yeah.
Interviews, right? Like how many times do you take for granted a guest that you have on the show, or maybe you don't, or it's an important reminder to not do that.
Yeah.
And value how much more you could get out of that interaction if you were mindful.
Yeah.
And what additional insights could be pulled out, because it's becomes this this two-way give and take, this flow, right? And as you become more present, that activates something in the receiver that says this person is paying attention, and they become more mindful. And then you begin to create this vortex of mindfulness, if you will. And I think that those types of interactions become so much more powerful, not only for both parties involved, but at the end of the day, the listener as well, to say, wow, I can hear that these two people are connecting and are mindful of each other in a way that's not normal in everyday life.
Yeah.
And it's activating something in me that's forcing me to pay even more attention than I normally would.
Yes. Yeah. That's cool.
I just want folks to sit with that for a while. They're tapping they're checking their iPhone at this moment in time. Like, did I lose the episode?
What happened here? I was on a crescendo there.
Yeah.
There was earlier in some of what you were saying, when you started talking about the relevance for a podcaster, I think another aspect of that is like, you know, the storytelling is so particular, and I'm always very compelled, like really good storytellers, they include unusual or the landscape of the story is very particular, if you know what I mean. It's kind of arrayed with like color and those five senses that you were talking about. Excuse me. You need, in a certain way, good storytellers. They have to be people who are really paying attention to their world, because there's so much to share. When you really start paying attention, then you start to see the details in life. I'm always amazed at how much shit I miss. And then when I start to pay attention, it's there. I'm like, God damn, I am missing so much. And that's just part of it. That's part of being human, whatever. But like the richness of a really good storyteller, you can tell that is a very mindful person. They're very attentive to their environment. They're very attentive to detail. And I think so much of mindfulness is about, the quality of attention you were just describing. One hallmark of that is this attention to detail, really. And that, it just grounds everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the beginner shouldn't feel like this is something that's beyond their grasp of either comprehension or ability to begin to practice, because as with all things, you start by doing, and the first time you're not going to be an expert at all. But I think it's important to understand that I'm never going to master meditation until the day I die. Like it's just one of those, fascinating things in your life that in my mind, I'll always be a student. Right.
Yeah.
And so you can just jump on that train, like at any point. Right. And there shouldn't be anyone listening that thinks it's too late or they don't know enough, because quite honestly, one of the things I learned at EnlightenNext is the instructions are fairly simple. You sit, you sit and you close your eyes and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Our instructions were like terrifyingly simple. You just let the universe happen and you just be there with it and not resist.
Yeah, I think so many people get caught up in the how do I do this, or I got to pick up the Meditation for Dummies book, and it's just I think there actually is one, and it's
definitely,
and it's probably like 80 pages, and I'm like thinking, what could they possibly be covering in that book? When you realize at the heart of it, it's just be still.
Yeah. What is that quote? Is that, I don't know if it's Rumi or what it's, but there's a very powerful quote. It's just, be still and know that I am God. I can't remember who that was, but I love that quote. So
talk to me about the importance of teachers and mentors, because you've had, quite the lineup of people to inspire you, and that you've had the privilege of learning under. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about how important that is to you and in your practice as you've grown.
And particularly with respect to meditation?
Yeah, or just in how you live, how you choose to live your life.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Like, I wonder if you found this, like, for me, like something categorically changed when I crossed the 40-year threshold, and like there was like, I think Amy Jo, our friend Amy Jo, I think said this once. She's like, the 20s are for learning, and the 30s are for yearning, and the 40s are for earning. Learning, yearning, and earning. And it's kind of, in certain ways, it may be a little trite, but I think there's something to it. It's like, I felt that, or it might have been yearning, learning, and earning. I don't know, but I think what happened when I turned 40 was I felt like for the first time in my life, I was like, I need to start looking to myself to like fundamentally generate my own direction, my own, and provide my own inspiration. And, still I feel like I have lots of mentors. Like I think of the folks as my wife is texting me like mad right now. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I think about like the folks at Copyblogger. Like for me, they appeared at a certain point in my life, and suddenly I started to study everything that they put out, and I was like, I can learn all of this and internalize it, and it's going to help me just help to define my own path. And part of that, the context for that was that I was in that ashram for 15 years, and suddenly no home, no income. It was my job, it was my home, it was my community. All of that just dissolved. And so like my wife and I had to move back. We lived with my parents for like 6 or 7 weeks and before moving to Boston. But it was like one of those moments of reflection or inflection where suddenly it was like, all right, I'm on some way here, I'm on my own. And I'm going to create something just from my own sweat and see where I can go. And before that, though, I think, I obviously don't think I could have done any of what I've done over the last 2 years, like starting the podcast, building up About Meditation.com, and then, without my mentors before. And I absolutely feel like there's something invaluable about spending time with a teacher or teachers to whom you give everything almost, and really commit. And I know I did for my teacher. It was probably like, I'd never been so committed to one thing ever in my life before that. And it's exhilarating to give everything to like one pursuit, one person. And I really, there's a lot of risk in that too. But for my teacher, I feel like there are gifts that I received that are still like, there were seeds, that are just growing now. And I feel like the work I'm able to do, although I wouldn't have known it then, it's all built on that. It's all coming from that. It all comes from that time I spent. And I think now, though, being out of that community and being on my own, that was like necessary. It's like you need to jump out of the nest so that it becomes your own. And there was a certain way when I was with my teacher so closely, I don't think I could have probably ever self-actualized in the way that I feel like now I can on my own, taking what I learned and making it my own. And I think for me, that's a lesson, or that's like a theme that's pretty significant in my life right now relative to my mentors and relative to my teachers, which is, how do I make this my own and grow it and tend it and, reap the harvest, so to speak, over time. And, but, I think the value of, I had this experience too, Harry. I wonder, like, I went to boarding school, and then I had my, it was like 20 year reunion a couple years back. And I was able to go back to a bunch of those teachers and thank them. Because some of them just, things that they had said had never left me. And I realized they had kind of become the fabric of like how, in some fundamental way, they colored how I saw the world. And so how I also understood happiness, and how I understood like intelligence, and how I understood, you know, a life of meaning and value. And a lot of that, I just felt so grateful to be able to close the loop and go back and just be like, look, you made a huge impact on me, and thank you. You know, I feel like that was a precious thing to be able to like say thank you. And then I think with my most recent like teacher, the one who we kind of shared, you know, who was the leader of our community, I think because there was a kind of tumultuous breakup, it'll take a while for me to probably fully be able to embrace and integrate like gratitude for everything I got out of that. But I'm totally clear about the fact that I got an amazing amount, and I can't divide it from anything I'm doing at this point. It's in me now. It's just part of me. And I just wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it weren't for that. Is that too vague?
Not at all. Okay. Not at all, because it's interesting. It puts the relationship with your mentor in a context of something that's cyclical and has a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard it described in a way that triggered that realization for me, because a lot of times people think we have teachers, we have, people that we learn from, and at some point you need to apply what they've taught you.
Yeah.
And you can't be the eternal student, because then you're never going to be able to be in a position where you've demonstrated that you've understood what it is that they've taught, and apply your spin on it, and then put it out in the real world and take it out for a spin and see if it holds water.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this, we can get stuck in the theory of it all and say, well, and then when we try to apply practice to it, it falls apart.
Yeah.
And then what in fact did we get taught, and did, are we wasting our time? Sometimes we have to like really go back and forth and put some of these out and field test it, to see if number one, it resonates with you, and if it's something that can be valuable for you as you grow as a person.
Yeah.
So that's great. Great advice. I don't know if you realized you were giving advice, but
no. I like the way you spun it. I like that a lot.
So
I resonate with that.
Yeah. So you mentioned about meditation.com. Did that come soon after you realized you needed to have something that was your own? Because I know you have a co-founder on that as well.
Yeah. So I had when we left EnlightenNext, I didn't have a clear sense of what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. And our mutual friend, Jeff Carrera, who I've interviewed on the About Meditation.com, the OneMind podcast, great teacher, interesting guy. And he introduced me with this gentleman who became my co-founder, who had this site that had been going for about a year, About Meditation.com. And it was kind of it was a curation site. So it curated a lot of information about meditation. And he had a big kind of Facebook, the Facebook page, I think it had like 60,000 fans. And that was like right before Facebook just like turned off the tap on like, the reach. It was like back when you could post something on Facebook and like 30,000 people would see it.
Yeah,
it was like massive reach. And then it, went down to like 300. And I just felt like with Tom had like his interest and excitement for the site had was languishing. He was he's a businessman, and he's a longtime meditator, but he'd built and sold like a big market research firm and had spent 27 years as the CEO of that company. And this was a real, it's just a small one among many side gigs for him. And he needed someone to kind of take the wheel. And so I thought, well, okay, it marries a lot of my passions, writing, marketing, and meditation. And it's almost like, in a certain way, felt like a sandbox in which I could like apply a lot of the principles and lessons I was learning about content marketing. So and also I'm sure in a lot of ways it's just therapeutic for me to just have an outlet, like you said, to be able to produce and create, to do so in a context when I wasn't being micromanaged. I wasn't being continually evaluated. It was mine. Basically, I could, I had full reign over the creative direction. So that for me was all those things were important. And I thought, all right, well, I need somewhere to put my attention. And so that was I have felt like a productive channel for that.
And how's the response been since you've joined, or how has the site grown? Or
I mean, it's been great. I mean, our email list was only like 500 people, and now it's about 12,500 people on our email list.
Very nice.
The traffic has gone from like, I don't know, it's like 5,000 a month to now it's upwards of like 40,000 a month. A lot of the podcast is really continues to just grow and grow, and the downloads are growing every day. And the SEO keeps improving, and Google is sending us like more and more traffic. And I feel, and then I got into like Facebook advertising and finally started to get like regular sales going on the site with like, I've had like 6,000 people take my meditation course on that site. And that was just, so at first I offered it for free for like a year and a half. And then now it's been a paid product for about, I guess, six or 8 months. And now we get, it's just a simple $20 kind of introduction. But now we're through like lead nurturing cycle, we get just some regular, not quite daily, but almost sales on that. And I feel like I'm really happy with it, and it's been awesome. We're about to kind of pivot now into like, I'm going to step back from like the daily engagement with it, because, I don't think I told you this. So my wife's pregnant.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. You mentioned that on the last episode, or one of the last episodes.
Yeah. So
congratulations.
Thank you very much. So that has like, About Meditation was still just paying for itself. It wasn't paying me yet. So that had changed, obviously accelerated my focus on, I need to actually bring in some money. And so I've switched to doing consulting, and we're shifting the blog to be a multi-author blog, and I've got a bunch of monthly columnists lined up, and we're going to relaunch in the new year. So it's going to become a much more diverse site with a lot more content covering a wider spectrum of topics around meditation. And yeah, I'm super excited about that. We're just getting more focused, and at the same time expanding.
That's awesome. Sounds like there's a lot of good things happening.
Yes, I'm excited.
Really happy for you.
Thank you, sir.
We covered a lot here.
Yeah, I know. It's a broad spectrum we're hitting.
Yeah, of course. And just we'll do a couple more questions.
Yeah.
What's been the response to the podcast?
I mean, so far it's like, I think because like what you were saying early on, like it's so intimate that I think pretty quickly it's become the most valuable thing that we're doing. And, you know, I have people sign up or even buy some of our more advanced courses, and they're like, it's great, but the podcast is really where the action is. And they're like, I've learned more from the podcast than I did from your course. And like that,
Wow.
that's it. Yeah. So that's interesting to me. It's obviously, I think, where my heart is more, because it's probably similar to you. I mean, it's just, I'd love to hear your take on this. Is like, I can't stop thinking about different shows, new shows
Yeah,
that I want to create. You know, it's just like, oh my God, you know, you could do this and it'd be great. And, you know, I could tell this story, and like, you know, there's so many opportunities. And so I think that kind of gets reflected a little bit. I mean, I get, so it's really, the responses are really sweet. So I hear people write, and they're just, it's clear it becomes a kind of a grounding force for people. And it's slowly but surely you can just feel a community of listeners is really growing, and they send stuff, and then they ask for, you know, feedback or advice, or do you think X, Y, and Z? And, you know, I like being able to develop these relationships with people and share my expertise. And at the same time, you know, I try and remind people I'm not a licensed mental health practitioner. You know, my expertise doesn't go beyond the boundaries of myself. You know, it's like I have a 20 plus years experience in depth with meditation, but like that experience wasn't also about dealing with trauma and which is a lot of what people ask me about. And there's obviously a real need for that. And I feel like I've learned more in certain ways through my therapy about processing trauma and processing emotionally challenging incidents than I have through meditation. And of course they're related, but so that's
good.
Yeah.
What have you changed your mind about recently?
I've changed my mind. All right. So so this is all right, man. So I hope this doesn't come off as like too, I'll just say it. It's like, all right, since there's been a podcast where we've talked a lot about, like, circled around the idea of God, we'll just like, I use that word very loosely. I grew up in a Christian context, and then that was not, you know, more or less my parents were secular.
Yeah.
And I prayed growing up, but I never had an idea to whom or what I was praying. And we didn't go to church or anything. And then also with our spiritual community, there wasn't a strong idea of God. It was more of spirit. And I think, you know, one thing that's changed recently is that the idea that, like, you can find God wherever you are. Like, there's just, you know, that interview I told you about earlier about the guy who really suffered, and his opening line was like, you know, someone asked me where I find God, and he's like, I find God in the light. I find God, it's the light that I find in the darkness. And he said, I was like, wow, you know, that's really interesting. But I think I am experiencing that more, in that, like, there's a certain, like, I spend so much time, like, in a transcendent medium, like going for transcendent experiences, getting off this plane of existence and, like, trying to go for higher, faster, like, more, like, you know, out of this world experiences. And then I think a lot through my own experience of this kind of body-based therapy that I'm doing, finding, like, there's incredible richness in letting the pain of existence and the suffering that's a normal part of being a human being. It's a completely normal part of being human to not run from it, to let it actually impact me and let it actually hit me, because it's all there. And I think so much of my life, I haven't had the vocabulary, mental, emotional, or spiritual vocabulary to deal with that and let it just be, and not like turn away from it, but to really turn towards it and find, oh my God, I feel so much more connected with everybody, with everyone, when I just let my heart break, because if it's like, it's fucking broken, man. Now I'm like, and then like, it's like, it's just real. And I'm like, it's like that movie Inside Out from Pixar, I was like, I identified with the Joy character who couldn't deal with letting the sadness be there. And then she finally recognizes, right? You can't have, joy does not exist independent of sadness.
Sure.
And I know it's a kind of a superficial example, but it kind of hits it. And I think that's, lately for me, that's been a huge change. Like seeing that God is like in every dimension of our humanity. It's not just like these transcendent experiences. It's like when your heart breaks, man, there's just this sweet pain of connection.
Wow. Yeah, we're not gonna. That's the bow on this conversation. Yeah, we don't need to say anything else at this point. I think that you basically summarized encapsulated what we're trying to capture here. So we're gonna leave it at that. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Harry.
This has been fantastic conversation.
Yeah, I'm really so glad you reached out. I'm glad we connected, and I'm grateful for the chance to be here with you.
And it's one of those. I have a friend, Dave Jackson. He's always fond of this because of my podcast story, and this is a prime example of because of my podcast. We were able to reconnect, and and I'm gonna make sure that this connection remains. Now we're not gonna fall out again, so we're definitely gonna stay close, and I'm just really excited about the way the universe works to kind of put things into perspective and line things back up and make things whole again. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to interview you for my show. I mean, if you have a very interesting perspective now on practice, and I'd love to ask you about your meditation practice, but also hear more about, if you're willing to talk about it.
Of course.
The ceremonial context.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. More to come then.
Awesome.
So what's the best place for folks to track you down online?
I think they can visit aboutmeditation.com, or they can also, I think that's the best way. And you can always reach out to me at Modern Meditator on Twitter.
And the name of the podcast is the OneMind Podcast.
Yeah, the OneMind Meditation Podcast.
Yes. Well, Morgan, this has been a blast. I'm buzzing right now. So thanks again.
Nice.
And I hope you have a fantastic week and holidays, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, Harry. Likewise, it's been a real pleasure.
Take care.
You too.
So what'd you think? Was that relaxing? Did it make you think? Did it set you at ease? Did it set your mind at ease? I found myself in a very relaxed state during our conversation, and I think it's we're both. It's a topic we're both really interested in. So I think we sort of got into this zone, which was fantastic. It was really cool, and I felt it. You heard me talk about it at the end of the episode, and it's awesome. When it's almost like you start vibrating at the same frequency, and I felt that's really like what we were doing during this episode. So it was really cool. I liked it a lot. I hope you did too. And if you did, let me know in the comments. Check it out. The show notes are going to be at podcastjunkies.com/71. And I'd really like to hear your feedback on this. So we are a proud member of Podcastica, a fantastic, fantabulous collection of amazing podcast shows, and some of which I think you should check out. They include the Walking Dead cast, Evil Dead cast, Under the Comic Covers, Sci-Fi Movie Podcast, Once Upon a Podcast, Game of Microphones, and Podcast Junkies. I'm going to be on a episode of Walking Dead cast during the break. They like to cover some different movies, and one of the ones we're going to cover is one of my favorites, Old Boy. So I'm looking forward to being on the show with Jason and Karen, or it might just be Jason, or it might just be Karen. But it should be fun for me to be there as a guest. So stay tuned for that. I'll let you know when that's happening. Music, intro and outro, provided by Cedar and Soil. Check out cedarsoil.com for more information and to see what George is up to. What else is going on here? A lot, right? We are growing the show. Jason and I are looking at some new shows to add to Podcastica, and I think that's going to be a good thing. So don't forget, if you want to give me the virtual high five, then do that via iTunes and subscribe to the show. Check that out, and then tell your friends about it and have them subscribe as well. And then if you haven't done so, leave a rating and review. Don't forget a good way you can support the show so that we can grow, because all this costs money, and anything you guys can do to help me offset some of these production costs is immensely, that's the word I was looking for, immensely appreciated. So check out the Amazon link. It shows all the podcasting gear. So if you have a hankering for podcast gear, then use the Amazon podcast button on podcastjunkies.com, or check out this growing list of affiliates for services that you might need: hosting, podcast hosting, graphic design, 99 Designs, things of that nature. Podcastjunkies.com/affiliates. And as always, if you're not a member of the list, there's a couple of different forms on the main page. There's a pop-up. There's a bar at the top of podcastjunkies.com. Just drop in your name. I want to make sure you get the email every week where we let you know what's been going on with from an episode perspective, and the other occasional news about the podcast itself. And it's my way of staying in contact with you. So don't forget to check us out on the social media sites. All the buttons are on podcastjunkies.com. You can pick the flavor that you prefer. I think that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed your company, and I enjoy bringing this show to you every single week. Monday mornings. Make sure you're there, because I will be. See ya.